5 of the fantasy football season. Here's tight end starts. It's every matchup this week. Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Atlanta Falcons. K-Dot in the last 2 weeks, he's come on a little bit for this Tampa Bay Buc team, but inconsistency is going to be there when you got weapons, obviously, like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin getting a lot of receptions and getting a lot of targets. Week in and week out, it's going to be different numbers. So K-Dot, he's a big target in the red zone, especially 6'7", 6'8". Yards after catch, he's been pretty decent this season for this Tampa Bay Buc team. And this week in a matchup at Atlanta, Thursday Night Football, where it could be high scoring, and those games for the most part are over the last few seasons. Otton is a borderline option. Kyle Pitts a borderline option. Pitts, this is make or break this season, and so far this year, to be honest, he hasn't been impressive. I know Kirk Cousins hasn't been 100% for this Atlanta Falcon team. I know this week a decent matchup versus the Buccaneers where their defense isn't all that great with injuries as well, but still, Kyle Pitts is hard to trust 100%. So at best this week, he's a borderline option, even with the bye weeks. New York Jets in London at the Minnesota Vikings. Tyler Conklin, he's pretty much had one big game, but I know a few factors. Tyler Conklin versus his former team in this ball game, the Minnesota Vikings. We know he's a good tight end, yards after catch, but him and Aaron Rodgers really haven't connected so far this season, besides in week 3 versus New England Patriots. And last week, this Jet offense couldn't move the football. Tough matchup versus the Vikings, one of the better defenses in the league. So Conklin, he's a back-end tight end this week and a borderline option. Johnny Munt, Josh Oliver, both sits for me for this Viking team. I know they got a touchdown each in the last 2 weeks, but that was at the goal line where no one was expecting the football to go then. Either Aaron Jones running it or Justin Jefferson. So this week in a tough matchup versus the Jets, this hits Carolina Panthers at the Chicago Bears. Tommy Trimble, haven't seen much out of him this season. He's a sit. Just no consistency at the tight end position for many seasons for this Carolina Panther team. But Deontay Johnson, Xavier Legette, and Chuba Hubbard have been vocal points the last couple weeks and making plays. Cole Kmet start. I know Kmet had the breakout game 2 weeks ago at the Indianapolis Colts. Then last week a pedestrian game, but this week in a good matchup. And with the bye weeks, I think Kmet could get back on the right track. And he's a big tight end who's got yards after catch ability. He could go out there and make plays. We've seen it the last couple seasons. Just him and Caleb Williams haven't been on the same page. But I'm going to go off the matchup in this one and start Kmet. Cleveland Browns at the Commanders. David Njoku, if he plays in this game, I like him as a start. One of the more athletic tight ends in all pro football. And him and Deshaun Watson actually had a good rapport in the games they played together, even though we know last season he broke out in the second half of the year with Joe Flacco was David Njoku. But if he's back in the lineup and much needed for this Cleveland Brown team, he's a start. Jordan Akins, he's a sit for me if Njoku's out. The numbers haven't been there. No production for the most part. And he's a backup tight end that's filling in. And you see why, because he's not getting production and he's more of a blocker than a receiving tight end. Zach Ertz a start. Zach Ertz, we know he's a veteran. We know he's at the latter part of his career. But this Commander team 3-1, and Zach Ertz is still finding ways to go out there and make plays. I know his ceiling is capped 10, 11 fantasy points in PPR leagues, but tight end's a weak position, like I mentioned, where we've seen top tight ends like Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta, Mark Andrews going into the year. Ball games where they don't do anything in the early going. So Zach Ertz, like I said, his floor is 7-8 fantasy points, and with tight end being a weak position, it's not a bad option. Miami Dolphins at the Patriots. Jonnu Smith, the city, had one decent game this season. The last couple weeks, no one's done anything on this Dolphin offense. Besides Tyreek Hill, even though he's been struggling, and Devon Achane, those are the only two Dolphins right now with Huntley at quarterback or whoever's going to be quarterback week in and week out till Tua returns. I would start Hunter Henry or Sid. Anyone in this Patriot offense besides Stevenson as well is inconsistent. 1 week a good week, couple weeks a bad week, and then you wait around again and get the good week. So Hunter Henry, there's definitely a possibility he could go out there and have a good game, but anyone on this offense, like I mentioned, I'm not interested unless it's Stevenson. He's a sit. Indianapolis Colts at the Jaguars. Kyle Granson a sit. This tight end position in Indianapolis rarely has been used. I know Granson last week found the end zone. It was great, no doubt about it. But if Anthony Richardson's back in the lineup, everyone takes a hit in the passing game where it's run first a lot for the Indianapolis Colts. And 8 to 10 times a game as well, Richardson's going to take off and take the football himself. So if Flacco's in the lineup, maybe Granson will have a better performance than with Richardson in the lineup, but he's still a sit this week. Evan Ingram, if he's back this week where he's day-to-day with his injury, he's a borderline option. We haven't seen Evan Ingram in action since week 1, where he got hurt in week 2 in warm-ups before the ball game versus the Cleveland Browns. Evan Ingram last season, a monster year. over 100 catches this season at the tight end position. But this season, injuries and this offense as a whole just can't do anything for the most part consistent. Is Jacksonville 0-4 in the season? He's borderline at best. Buffalo Bills at the Houston Texans. Dalton Kincaid to start. Kincaid the last couple weeks, he's starting to get things going. I know it's not eye-popping numbers, but he's been more consistent tight end this season. Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta, Mark Andrews, and Trey McBride. So Kincaid the last couple weeks at least 8 or more fantasy points in PPR leagues. And this week in a potential shootout at Houston needs to start. Dalton Schultz to sit. He's the 4th or 5th option in this offense behind Nico Collins, behind Stephon Diggs, behind Tank Dell, who's most likely returning in this game, and the running backs as well in the backfield, either Joe Mixon or Cam Akers. So Dalton Schultz, he was good last year, no doubt about it, but when you're the 4th, 5th option, you're just not going to get targets or much production. He's a sit. Baltimore Ravens at the Bengals. Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, giving him a month now. And besides the pop game in week 1 for Likely, he hasn't done much since then after everyone ran out there in the wire and got him. And Mark Andrews, they saying he's going to come around and get things going. But if you're in a 1-3, 0-4 hole, you just can't trust Mark Andrews. Last week, another goose egg. Mark Andrews just hasn't done anything this season besides the one game. And a couple games non-existent, especially last week, 1 target and no catches in that one. So Mark Andrews, I know he's a Pro Bowl tight end. I know he's had great seasons. But right now, this offense is all about Lamar Jackson running and obviously feeding King Henry in the backfield, having a season so far. So both tight ends inconsistent. I know this week they definitely could go out there and have a game. I don't see it. Mike Gesicki, Eric Wall Jr. sits. Gesicki had a couple pop weeks here and there, but last week, 1 catch, -9 yards, not going to get the job done. Eric Wall's playing into his snaps a little bit. And now Joe Burrow with T. Higgins back in the lineup. That's going to be more targets taken away from Gesicki. So he's a sit for me in this one. Vegas Raiders at the Broncos. Brock Bowers, he had an off game last week. But now with Davante Adams most likely getting traded or at least still going to be out with the injury, Bowers is going to get more targets. And this Raider offense, they got to get the passing game going any way they can. And I think Brock Bowers will be the answer, especially in this one at the Broncos, where we know Patrick Surtain, he's going to be on Jacoby Myers. And Trey Tucker, he's looked decent so far in the early going, but have to see more out of him to be a consistent option. So I think Brock Bowers bounces back in this one. And if they want to produce offense in the passing game, this is their best way to do it. Greg Dulcich is sit. Haven't seen much out of Dulcich this season. I think later on, as he gets healthier, maybe he could be an option because we know young quarterbacks, the security blanket is the tight end position, and they rely on them in key spots, but that hasn't been the case this season. Arizona Cardinals at the 49ers. Trey McBride still in concussion protocol, but I put him on the list just in case he comes back and plays for this Arizona Cardinal team. But like I said, if he's still in the protocol, it's obviously a bad concussion 10 days in now for this Cardinal team. But McBride's a top option almost weekly at the position. And if he sits, Elijah Higgins is going to get the start. We didn't see much at all from the passing game last week in Arizona besides Marvin Harrison having a nice game and James Conner making plays out of the backfield. So Elijah Higgins will be a sit. George Kittle will start. He's going to be a top 3 option and minimum weekly at the tight end position. Like I said, Kittle's been consistent. Last week, great grab in the back of the end zone. And what a good matchup versus the Arizona Cardinals, a team he's obviously familiar with and had success within the same division. He's a slam dunk start. New York Giants at the Seahawks. This one, none of the tight ends have been productive. Theo Johnson, Daniel Bellinger, 2 young tight ends, no doubt about it. But this Giant offense pretty much runs through Malik Neighbors and Wan'Dale Robinson, the only other player who has production in the passing game. So both these tight ends, we have to see many weeks of production for them to be options. Noah Fant to sit. He's the 4th, 5th option in this offense behind DK Metcalf, behind Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith-Njigba. Charbonnet and Walker out of the backfield can make plays as well. So even in a good matchup, Noah Fant is just not on the radar. Green Bay Packers at the Rams. Tucker Kraft, I'm putting him in the starting lineup. I know he had one big week, but last season we saw great games out of Kraft as well towards the end of the year when Musgrave was out with injury, and him and Jordan Love definitely have a good rapport. Jordan Love really spreads that football out and is one of the better quarterbacks in the league, I believe, is Love. And Tucker Kraft, athletic tight end, who go out there, yards after catch, run the seam. And I think this week in a matchup, it'll middle of the pack Ram defense. He has another good game. Colby Parkinson, a borderline option. This Ram offense is depleted with Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua out, obviously, for multiple weeks and more weeks to come before they return to the lineup. And Parkinson, he really hasn't had great games, but I think he's a borderline option. Like I said, there's not much going on. Jordan Whittington, Tutu Atwell, the only two other options who've gone out there and been decent for this Ram team. So I think Parkinson in a matchup where they're going to have to throw a lot is a borderline option. Cowboys at the Steelers, Sunday Night Football, Jake Ferguson to start. Ferguson, one of the better tight ends in the league, and he's the number 2 option in this passing game. Brandon Cooks, Jalen Tolbert haven't done much. At CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson is the top targets in the passing game. And Ferguson, last season, a big year. And going back to his days with Jason Witt and Dak Prescott's always targeted the tight end and had good rapport with all his tight ends, even with Dalton Schultz before he went to Houston. So even in a tough matchup, Ferguson to start. Pat Freiermuth to start as well. Freiermuth's been solid this season, and Justin Fields has always liked targeting the tight end as well over the last few seasons with the Bears with Cole Kmet. And this season, him and Pat Freiermuth's been on the same page, finding the end zone last week. So versus a banged-up Cowboy defense, I think Freiermuth goes out there and he's another start. Final game of the week, New Orleans Saints at the Chiefs Monday night. Taysom Hill, we'll see if he plays in this one. He got hurt and left the ball game in the loss week 4 at the Atlanta Falcons. Taysom Hill did have 2 goal line touches. We know he's the gadget guy, but inconsistencies it is for Taysom Hill. He'll have those 2 rushing touchdown games like he did last week, and then times he don't even touch the football at is Taysom Hill. Or gets minimum 1 or 2 touches, so he's tough, obviously, to navigate what they're going to do with him week in and week out is this New Orleans Saints team. But if he does play, especially in a game where they know they got to put points on the board at Kansas City, he's a borderline option. Forced on my road, Juwan Johnson sits. First week of the season, they both found the end zone in the 47-10 victory versus the Panthers. But ever since then, they haven't done much, and they're not on the radar. And Travis Kelce last week had the big bounce-back performance. And now with Rashee Rice out, Travis Kelce is going to be the number 1 target in the passing game, where there's not much behind them. Obviously, they got Xavier Worthy, the young rookie. We'll see if he could get things going this season. Juju Smith-Schuster, Watson, and Sky Moore. So Kelce once again will be the vocal point in this offense. And then we back as a top productive tight end. That's tight end start sits every matchup. Week 5 of the fantasy football season.